No, come on.
No, that's the truth. She wins every year.
Wow, that's perplexing to my head. Scotty, and this is maybe a silly question, but I don't know. It could be. We'll see, I guess. Do you think your few years of playing fantasy and creating the game, and the idea of drafting, has any influence or has helped you at all in your real life job? As the director of scouting for the Kings.
No, not at all. It was a game, and we played it, and there's no real consequence if you do a bad job. If you do it in real life,
right, you
and
fired,
you do a lousy job of scouting and drafting, pretty soon you're not going to be in that job. So it was fun. We played for a few bucks, and that was about it. And I got to the point in the second year where I'd forget to. We used to have to call in our team on Thursday of the week, and sometimes I get so busy I'd forget even. So it has no sense of reality to it at all. Maybe it does now. I don't know. Guys are pretty into it pretty good, but I never saw where it translated to reality.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that the first fantasy football league that I think you created in '62, but it actually took place in '63, I think is what you said.
Yeah, the first season was '63.
Right. Do you happen to recall who the top scoring player was in that first fantasy?
The number one pick was George Blanda, who was a quarterback at Houston, and he was also their place kicker. So you had a couple of chances to score with his touchdown passes and with his points after touchdown and his field goals. And I think he might have been the leading scorer in the AFL that year, so he was a good first pick.
That is the correct answer. He was the top scoring player that year. Scotty, did you have a name for this? Did you call it fantasy football?
Oh yeah. We had a name that we came up with in New York, and the acronym is GOPTL, GOPTTL, the Greater Oakland Professional Pigskin Prognosticators League. GOPTL.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Well, I guess the term fantasy football, I'm not sure exactly when that came around. I'm sure as it got bigger and bigger, it eventually kind of, obviously the GOPTL name that you had doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but interesting that's what it was originally referred to as. Scotty,
well, the first time I was aware that it had spread, it was in maybe the mid-'70s, and that they were playing it in New York, and they called it rotisserie football because they all met and did their drafting and whatnot at a restaurant in New York called the Rotisserie. So before I heard fantasy, I heard rotisserie.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Very interesting. Now, Scotty, you did mention that you don't play fantasy anymore and haven't obviously for quite some time, but and I'm kind of guessing one of the main answers to the question I'm about to ask you is probably the invention of Al Gore's internet back in the early 90s, which obviously probably very much helped fantasy football come along to what it's become today. But do you kind of have a feeling as to maybe what the reasoning behind what fantasy football success has been throughout the years?
Well, I think first of all, it's bigger than football than it is anything else. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, pro football is a cult in my mind. All the pregame stuff in the parking lot, and like people dress up like the Black Hole in Oakland. It's all kind of a cult, and I think playing fantasy football is kind of cultish too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think guys are so into football, that pretending that you're a general manager and you're making draft picks and you're deciding each week who to play. I think there must be a tremendous kick for guys in that. And if pro football wasn't so popular, probably the fantasy game wouldn't be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Football is obviously huge, the NFL and football in general. And I know, speaking for myself, and probably, I don't know, Bub, is you as well, or a few other maybe people in our particular league, we unfortunately aren't as maybe don't have one of the dream jobs that we would like to have, maybe more in your field, being in the sports management, GMs and whatnot. So kind of being able to use it as a hobby and something to do on the side to be able to kind of manage your own team, even though fictional in theory, is you still kind of get, as you said, some of your kicks that way. So, in addition to what you
Yeah,
said.
I think that's probably the attraction to it, and I can understand that.
Right. Very good. Well, his name is Scotty Sterling, and he is the Director of Scouting for the Sacramento Kings and one of the fantasy football's founding fathers. Scotty, thank you again so much for your insight. This was very interesting, and again, thank you so much for being on the show.
All right, Eric, Bubba, have a good day.
Thank you. You too, sir.
That was this week's Dynasty Podcast interactive segment.
I mean, it's actually it's interesting.
Very interesting.
It's interesting to kind of see how it all came about, because
Yeah.
I know that I have wondered. I mean, when I started playing fantasy football, it was on Yahoo or whatever,
Sure.
and it was all. So I can imagine that that's basically how it was, just going back and picking players and doing it basically all by hand.
I mean, Al Gore certainly assisted, big assist, by the creation of the internet. That's really what kind of jump-started the huge outcry for this. But hey, great, Scotty. Now we know how fantasy football was born.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Mr. Sterling.
you, Mr. Sterling. Thank you.
Eric,
yes.
real quick, while I was off to the side here, we had mentioned before about Peyton Manning and
Oh, did you look at
the
up?
percent?
Yes.
Yeah, the percent of points, and I just did this quickly.
Great.
It is a hair under 40% of Glow's points.
40%. So basically,
a hair under.
Right.
Hair
So
under.
almost 40% Peyton. I bet that's got to be the most in the league. That's
by far. I
Yeah.
would say the most in the last few years.
That's crazy stuff. So that's a good step up.
Yeah,
we
yeah,
worked
thank
together
you.
on that
Thank
one. That's
you.
great stuff. This is gonna wrap up episode number 7 of the Dynasty Podcast. I'd like to thank Coach Jay Young Kim, Coach Brian Tavaleri, of course Scotty Sterling, all of you loyal listeners here that are listening each and every week. Next week, I do want to say that, Bub, as you know, you are actually going to be the coach's interview next week, so you will not be co-hosting with me. But I am actually very excited to announce that we are going to have 2 new coaches tri-coast with me.
Like a tripod.
A tripod, sure.
Like 3 Marshawn Lynch soda can penises.
Yes. Zach did a great job last year filling in a couple times, but just in an effort to switch things up a little bit, and both these 2 coaches, expressed some interest. Coach Brandon and Coach Jay Young, we just talked to him earlier. So
yes.
They are going to be joining me to try-host next week, which should be great, and we will interview you, Bub. And, of course, you get some coaching achievement points for doing that if you haven't already done it. So a little incentive there for you, you fuckers.
Yeah, by the way, that should be a pretty riveting interview. Edition 2 of the Pulitzer Prize-winning Riverdale Gazette has been mailed out. Is that real?
That is a fact.
Yours should be arriving on your doorstep week. If you don't receive yours by Friday, let the commission know. And please email, text, tweet, or Facebook message Commissioner Scooper your feedback. It goes a long way.
It does. It certainly does. This is Commissioner Scooper.
And this is Marshawn Lynch's soda can penis.
We're going to be back next week for episode number 8 with a special tri-hosted show. Coach Bubba Kalucha of Bubblegum Shrimp will be on the show, and an interactive segment involving Charter that you don't want to miss. Over and out.